Okay, when I was 16, my parents, well, my father came home and he was totally like on crack. My dad's like a drug dealer. He was either on like coke or PCP or something, but he was like out of his mind this day. And he came home and he just like looked really scary, and he and my mom got into this like huge fight, and then he started like bashing up all of our like electronics in the house, like any way for like my mom to communicate, and he cut our phone lines, and then he like stole this, like took the gun out of the case that was in our house and was gonna like shoot our family, and then I had to run across the street and like call the cops at my neighbor's house. But the cops took like
physically abusive
an hour and a half to get to my house, and by that time my dad had already left.
I also recently learned
and my sisters were like crying, and
but I remember one particular time, we were all in the car. I have two sisters, and my mother, my father, my sisters, and I, we were in the car, and we were going somewhere. I don't know what if the top busted off or whatever. We had a minivan. The bleach just went spraying everywhere. My little sister unfortunately got the brunt of it. It went down her front and covered most of her legs, and it got myself as well. We all went inside, and my dad in the middle of it, which took my older sister into the living room, and he started wailing. Amazingly enough, he never left my little sister upstairs to wash everything off of her, but he managed to hit just enough so it hurt like the devil, but never left a mark for it.
Probably one of the worst was I can't remember what month it was, but my stepdad was getting open heart surgery.
In the end, disowned me.
And my mom
the last 5 years
was kind of freaking out about it because she's had a long list of men that didn't stay around or died or
I forget what the argument was.
So she got really freaked out that he had to do this.
He took a chair and he threw it across the
to help her out because she was freaking out.
And it broke a mirror.
So I didn't have anybody to help me not freak out. So I had to stand there and be there for my mom. And it was the scariest because
I started crying.
I'd been in the hospital before, but
and he yelled at me
open heart
for
surgery
crying.
area or anything. And we were in the waiting room.
And then I got so angry. I don't remember what it was. It was like this white anger. I was furious.
And then for like a week after, I had to drive
And the
her
next
to
thing
the
I know, I
hospital,
was
and
driving
one day she
away.
came home crying because some nurse was mean to her. And she thought the nurse was going to be mean to
That
my
was
stepdad.
basically the end of it.
It was a very rough time.
I talked to him over the phone, and I told him I really didn't want anything to do with him anymore.
One time that my dad was going to
So that was probably
because he was having an affair.
one of the worst days I had with him.
And I remember finding my mom crying on the curb
About that I dated.
and wondering what she was going to do with
I
herself.
was so furious
I,
at him for a long
I
time.
held her and I said, "Oh, you could move in with me."
And I would have dreams at night
That was a bad dream.
of walking outside his apartment, because he lived on the second floor.
I remember.
There was like a flight of
It
stairs
was
coming
just a
down
stupid
on
short
the
little
side
dream,
of
but I
this
was getting
house.
ready for prom, and then the door, somebody knocks on the door.
I have
and
more
my
than
favorite
one
teacher
dream
from high school walks in
about
wearing a bow
that.
tie and
He would
a tuxedo
come
blazer,
downstairs,
but he wasn't wearing any
and he always
pants.
wore
He was
this
wearing
trench
white
coat,
boxers
like
with
the
blue
trench coat,
polka dots.
and building up behind
And I
him.
went, "Oh, hey,
coming
you're my prom date?" He
downstairs,
said, "Yeah,
waiting
yeah." I said, "You're not wearing any pants." He said, "It's okay, I'm your prom date."
And
And then we went to
I dream about, and he shaved his head bald.
I walked into
I would take his bald head
and I actually walked into my
and
bedroom.
put it up against the curb and kick the back of his head.
My husband was
And
having
just
sex
kick
with
it and
somebody,
kick it until he was
and
just pulp.
I just
on
remember
his
being so
curb.
weirded out by it, and he's like,
And I
"What?
would wake up with a huge smile on my face.
This was like, I guess a few years ago, and it was just so
I couldn't
weird.
believe the rage
And then he stood
that
up
I
and like peed all
had
over
for
the girl.
him.
It was really weird. That's
And I had a
That's
few
really all I
dreams
can
like
remember.
that where I would.
It doesn't sound bad when I talk about it, but it's a reoccurring dream that I used to get all the time as a kid, and it scared the bejesus out of me. But it's basically this one really big head on one side, and this little small head on the other, and the big one's just yelling at the small one so loud, and you can't understand the words because it's so mumbled and loud and awful, and then this little one's just trying to talk, and the big one keeps drowning him out, and poor little one never gets anything out. It's so scary though. I used to wake up just frightened to even close my eyes
On my
again.
patio from when I was a kid. We had this patio in our backyard, area, and I ended up like having sex with my mom, but then her head turned into like one of our forefathers' faces or something weird. Like she turned into some like old man.
I think they had bodies, but
I don't
they were
know.
very small
I
bodies.
can't really remember, but it was really terrifying and also disgusting.
I actually have a really good relationship with my mother. She's actually a friend now, and not just my mother. She's actually become one of my closest friends, and we were just talking again actually the other day about if I hadn't chosen the course of life that I had, that we would not have as good of a friendship as we do now.
Once it was green.
Every night I would come home and she'd be waiting, and we would usually get high.
Purple's a good color.
Okay.
Mixing of the red.
We'd get high and we would play the shadow puppet game.
Walk around, punching my teeth and holding them in place.
That's easy. When my sister
I don't want people to talk to me.
went into the hospital,
tell me how sorry they are.
She had a heart attack after overdosing on heroin.
What if
I worked in a
what do they expect me
pediatric
to say to
I
hospital
remember I was sitting on my
for
couch at about 10 in the morning.
3 months,
And my dad
and I had
called,
a
and I
patient.
picked it up, and I thought maybe he was calling because
She was 11-year-old
supposed
girl,
to
and she
go
was
with my mom
born
shopping.
blind. Do you remember? And
Go into like the big industrial freezer because
she was going
One
through
dream
rehab
that
for
I had,
major orthopedic surgery. One leg
I
was
must have had it when I
longer
was
than the other,
13 or 14.
and she was going through
I went to a
surgery to equal out the
carny
length of her
funeral.
legs, and she had
And
huge scars on both of her
the people there were all
thighs, and
huddled
it was very
around the
painful for her to move.
casket, which was a tiny little
and she couldn't move her
short
legs by herself,
casket
so she
with
couldn't get out of bed. She was in a
a
wheelchair,
midget in it.
I had
He
to
was
pick her
apparently
up
conjoined
to do
midget,
things like
and so his other
have her use the bathroom,
half was still
wash,
alive,
take a shower,
but
and
bleeding all over the place.
when
And
she was in pain when I
ritualistically,
moved her,
the-
she would
the carny
sing.
folk
She'd
allowed
sing songs to me.
the other
and
twin to
She
position
would tell me stories
his brother in the
about her
casket,
mother
how,
and
however like
how
he
she
thought
couldn't
he
wait
was
to get
holding his
home to
face in a
help her
certain way
mother.
or
And
something.
I'd say, you know,
And this man didn't have any
you really
arms,
need to get better
so
yourself.
he just had to
you
sort
know,
of
when you're in
use
the
his legs and
hospital,
throw the
this
other
is-
body around.
You know, this is your time to feel
there's
better.
obviously
And she said,
blood
I
and everything
want to
getting
go home and
everywhere.
make
It
my
was
mom feel
horrific.
better.
And I remember seeing
And
blood
she
spattering
talked
on the
about
face of the
kittens
bearded woman and
her baby
on
sisters.
these
and
strange
she was just
people,
such a
you know,
hopeful,
disfigured and everything.
optimistic little girl.
Um,
I found her
just
very
the horror
inspiring.
of it and the somberness and obviously the close bonds that you could feel in the room amidst these people that were total
My
strangers.
story was my older brother and I were
I
wrestling
remember
on his
waking up
waterbed
from
when
that
we were
and
a
just
lot younger.
being like, wow.
Somehow
was
I ended up
intense.
being thrown into the
That was
windowsill.
weird.
And so I got this really deep, awful cut on my knee, and it hurt like hell, and I was screaming and crying.
that was a good
And then my
one.
older brother felt so bad, he brought out all these Batman Band-Aids, and he first put like one or... I was like, the blood's gonna get out over there! And then he kept putting more and more, because I kept pointing in places where the blood would get out. So I ended up with like this...
Thing. And she was gray. Like, her lips were like blue. And
My mother and my father
her-
were the first
they
two that
pumped
they were
so
like
much
holding over
fluid
like
into
the
her to
cauldron,
get
and as they
to
were
try
like
and
putting them
kickstart
in,
her
that's when I woke
systems
up.
that
I mean, I was just, and it was
she
just the
looked
weirdest thing. I
like
remember
she was
my
about
sister just
300
telling me how
pounds.
silly I was
It was
because there's no
bizarre.
such thing as dragons.
And I looked at her and just kind of
but I guess
collapsed,
that's
and my
one.
dad caught me. That was the worst time. In my case, I'll realize that my gums have sort of melted into like a gelatinous goo, and the teeth
Me
will just
and my
sort of
friend
tear
were
out.
in this like medieval castle, and Michael Jackson was there once we like walked down this spiral staircase, and he had a boombox. and he puts the boombox down, and he like ejaculates on the boombox, and the ejaculation spot turns into a portal, and my friend and I jump in the portal, and we travel back to ancient like Rome and battle in this
Waking
Colosseum.
Up crying. Like,
and
actually, my sister
the
woke me
portal
up 'cause I
started
was
closing
crying in
up,
my
so we
sleep
were
about
screaming
being
to Michael
screaming.
Jackson for like
But it was really
him
odd.
to ejaculate on the radio again, so we could go back home. We're like, Michael, ejaculate on the radio.
And screaming and screaming, and the cat was, you know, just freaking out and hiding under the bed, and then I stopped screaming and was like, well, I better make that cup of coffee.
I just screamed yesterday.
I don't know what this day is going to be like, but I better be awake. You know, my parents are going to need me. I got to be like
when I
on
was like
point.
17 or 18, I'd go into like the big industrial
so I shut
freezer
up
because you can't hear anything out of there, and I would just scream
made a cup of
over
coffee.
and over. Then come out and be like, okay, now I can help some people.
So I shut up.
Grody. The dirtier the better.
But,
I'm just kidding. Not that dirty. Just a little dirty.
my
all in
my whole
moderation.
family was outside, and we were under a big tree.
And
at
you know
this
what we would
really
do, and I'm
long
just like,
table.
we've already talked about this, and he's
And
like,
there were
so
leaves
will you marry
falling
me?
down.
And I remember just thinking,
And
why are you
the leaves
asking?
were all
Like
different
we've been
colors.
discussing this for
There's bright
months.
red and yellow and
And
orange leaves
Then I
falling
noticed
down.
that he
And
sounded
everyone
nervous,
was
and he had
smiling
like
and
a little red
laughing.
flush on his cheeks.
And
And I looked down, and
in
he
the
had
dream, I had just
the most
gotten
beautiful
married,
ring I've ever seen.
But the
And it
person I
literally-
got married to
like,
didn't
it sounds
have a
sappy, but it was
face.
literally like just sparkling.
But
It was nestled in
this
black
person's family
velvet.
was all there, but they didn't have faces either.
And I just
but
looked
they
down,
were
and I
there
looked
with
up at him. I was like, oh my
family.
god, of course,
And
yes, yes,
everyone
yes.
was
And
We were hitting people
smiling
with
and
candy canes, and
laughing,
everyone was like really happy.
People were
and,
clapping
like,
hands.
well,
and
I can say that I just had probably one of the best days
it was
of
a
my
bright,
life.
sunny day, and I woke up. That it was probably one of the most vivid dreams I've ever had. Just the colors were very vivid.
She
and,
lived. It was a miracle.
About
But she
We had to
woke up
meet
the
all the
next day,
Santas
and
at
the
10
crazy
a.m.
thing was she
And
recognized
there's probably
to
like
this person who was
500
married and
Santas,
hugged
and we
them.
went through the entire city of New York all day
It
long,
made me feel so happy.
and singing Christmas songs and like dancing in the street.